Hi, this is Jay Scanoy, CEO and founder of Kwentuhan sa Gigirit, and I want to personally welcome and thank you all for joining us today. We're really glad that you're here because this podcast is designed for you, our Tambayan Live community. And now, here's your host, Mr. Abdul Mapagpanggap. Thank you, Mr. Kanoy. Just like what Mr. Kanoy said, we're really glad for having you today, our Tambayan Live community. And today, we are going to talk about whether an online seller should have a tax or not. Today, we have a special guest for Team Con, Miss Saira Bayot, Miss Ella Uy, Miss Jerry Perez, and Miss Alay Cardenas. Hey, nice to meet you all. And for Team Pro, we have Miss Charmaine, Miss Pika Santiago, Miss Jessa Cervantes, and Mr. Yoso. Yeah! So handsome, Mr. Yoso, ah. You look so handsome. Okay, anyway, before we proceed to the main point of this podcast, let's hear some words from our sponsor for today's video, Pagong LDT.
Sawa ka na ba sa napakabilis na internet connection? Walang buffering kapag nanonood ka sa YouTube? Kitang-kita mo ang bawat hilatsa na mukha ng crush mo kapag may FaceTime kayo? Di ka makapag-reason ng lag kapag naglalaro kayo ng tropa mo? Ito ang para sa iyo. Introducing Pagong LDT. 10 beses na mas mabagal, 10 beses na nakakabwisit, 10 beses kang mapapamura sa galit. Sobrang bagal, hindi ka makakapagpuyat, hindi ka makakalaro online, at higit sa lahat, walang website na mabubuksan. Ano pang hinihintay? Bili na ng Pagong LDT.
Mahalagang paalala, ang Pagong LDT ay hindi gamot at hindi maaaring gamitin gamot sa anumang uri ng sakit. Okay, let's get it on. So, Miss Charmaine, why do you think online seller should have tax?
Thank you for having me here, Mr. Abdul. So I am Charmaine G. Season from Bachelor of Science in Accountancy, and I'm here to elaborate my opinions why we should impose tax on different online selling platforms. The COVID-19 became a global pandemic and everything changed. The move to online selling seems to accelerate at warp speed since almost of the transactions are happening online. As consumers stayed at home to stop the spread of the coronavirus, they used different mobile apps and websites to buy different mix of products that they had previously purchased in stores, and of course, the convenience in buying online. Because of that, the government wanted these online selling businesses to register in Bureau of Internal Revenue or BIR so that they would be included in the formal economy before they are compelled to pay the right taxes. Online sellers whose yearly income exceeds to 250,000 pesos are obliged to pay the income tax But the palace clarifies that those online sellers whose yearly income is below 250,000 pesos are exempted to pay tax but must register or update their records to the BIR. By placing a tax on online selling platforms, the government collecting the tax revenue can use it to add to current infrastructure and government-sponsored programs, or it may be put the funds toward debt repayment. Since we are hit by a pandemic for months now and the Philippine economy is at risk, the government is looking for possible ways on imposing tax to online selling platforms since the demand of online sellers goes up by now. By placing a tax to different online selling nationwide or imposing tax to them, the government would be likely to reap a healthy source of additional revenue or taxes that may be helped to rebuild our economy and for those people who lost their jobs and affected by a pandemic.
Good point. How about you, Miss Ira? What can you say about this particular topic?
Thank you for having me, Mr. Abdul. Online business has provided a ray of hope during this pandemic. Thousands of Filipino economically displaced by the quarantine measures to contain COVID-19 pandemic have resorted to online selling to earn income for the family, enough for them to cope with living expenses while most of them are out of jobs. With the surge in online selling, no wonder that the Bureau of International Revenue, or BIR, set its sight to online shop and decided that they too shall pay taxes just like those with retail storefronts. Taxes will be a burden and not a help to every entrepreneur, especially the small ones. It shows negativity to the business. According to Bass, becoming an entrepreneur, which conveys including online selling, has many tax implications. Taxes are disadvantage to the entrepreneur because taxes lower their overall net profit. Government is focusing on implementing tax on Filipinos who earn a little money in online selling instead of focusing on the big-time tax evaders. For me, this is not the right time. This is not the best timing given that we are facing difficulties and most of the online sellers are just starting.
You also have a good point. But Miss Charmaine, Miss Syra, does your statement based on the research you've done, or is it just your opinion?
Yes, we've done research and we will show you some analytics later.
We also conducted some research and we will show you the analytics later.
Okay, we'll see those analytics later. But for now, let us hear what Miss Bika will say.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abdul, for having me in this podcast. So, the glossary of economics terms defines tax as a tax levied on the sale of a good or service which is usually proportional to the price of the good or service sold. So, what are the advantages of this tax? The biggest advantage to taxes are how economically efficient they are in collecting a single peso or revenue for the government. That is, they have the smallest negative impact on the economy per peso collected. By placing a tax on internet sales, the government collecting the tax revenue can use it to add to current infrastructure and government-sponsored programs. It may put the funds toward debt repayment. By placing tax on internet sales nationwide, the government would likely to reap a hefty source of additional revenue. Most of the revenue would come from the largest online retailing sources such as Shopee and Lazada. Considerably less revenue would come from small niche and specialty stores. The benefits of the added tax revenue will largely depend on how the government allocates the additional funds. For additional information, the increase in overall prices on goods caused by the introduction of the sales tax will encourage additional competition between virtual and brick-and-mortar stores. Imposing tax regulations on online selling platform might be excessively difficult right now, but as the percentage of sales transactions shift toward the virtual and away from the physical, governments will be increasingly aware of the demand and its revenue. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Vika. Now let us hear what Miss Ella's perspective about this. Miss Ella?
Thank you, Mr. Abdul, for having me. So, for this argument, in my view, there are some instances of disadvantages of imposing tax on online businesses. Since internet businesses at times appear to operate out of ambiguous locations, the enforcement of these laws and the identification of nexus to which the state or principality in which the business identifies itself as associating in geographic terms may be difficult and time-consuming for regulators. Large businesses with operations contingent on a level of transparency, as is the case for Walmart, do not suffer from difficulties establishing nexus. It is also unclear how the government will impose laws on the internet. Imposing regulations on online retail might be excessively difficult right now, but as the percentage of sales transactions shift toward the virtual and away from the physical, governments will be increasingly aware of the lost tax revenue. If goods purchased over the internet are taxed, this will raise the prices of the goods to the consumer. It will drive people back into brick-and-mortar stores to shop, which may help local economies, but it could also hurt the growth of the free market in America. The ability to conduct business without sales taxes has been an attractive facet for owners of new businesses who do not have the starting capital or the time to rent out a physical location. Internet sales are encouraged by the sales tax-free environment abounding today. The internet sales tax-free environment encourages consumers to purchase goods from out of state, to exercise an additional sense of personal autonomy by making purchases that are unrestrained by the constrictions of physical location, and to apply more scrutiny when looking for quality in goods. My point here is, if America, that has an economy way higher than the economy of the Philippines, yet still has encountered several disadvantages of imposing tax on online businesses, how is it possible for the Philippines to have the highest success rate of imposing tax on online businesses?
Thank you, Miss Ella. Both sides have point, but now let us see the analytics they made to support their statements. Okay, Miss Jessa, you go first.
Hi, thank you for having me, Mr. Abdul. By the way, I am Jessa Cervantes from Bachelor of Science in Accountancy 211. So let's start. So starting with 8% online sellers, it jumped into 10% and now 12% of people in the Philippines are using social media platforms to sell their product. And since pandemic started, online selling became one of the sources of our fellow Filipinos. We were under GCQ, MGCQ, ECQ, and counterclockwise. We are not allowed to go outside, and since Filipinos are known to be resourceful, they found a job such as online selling. But our government had a discussion about making online sellers pay taxes. A lot of them disagree without the knowledge that those online sellers earning more than 250,000 earning only are the one who should pay. And now online sellers earning 250,000 above are now paying taxes and should pay tax for it can help our economy grow because we've lost a lot since pandemic started. Taxes are also used to fund many types of government programs that can help the poor and less fortunate as well as many schools. So that would be all. Thank you.
Okay, then now let's see Miss Jerry Lee.
Hi, Charlie Paris is here. Good day, Mr. Abdul. Thank you for inviting me to this segment of the podcast. I really appreciate it, but let's start about the tax should not impose to the seller of online selling. Have they asked if putting tax on online selling is appropriate for all persons? seller and customers. In the Philippines, the effect of imposing tax on online selling on both parties, seller and customer, but mostly as a whole of online selling and e-commerce. Ranking of online selling in the Philippines 2019, e-commerce or online selling has a good or high amount of estimate that shows most of the people purchase online, buy online, and Lazada is the number one on the ranking of the Philippines. Next is Shopee, after the last Beauty MNL. People tend to buy online because it is accessible, convenient, more variety, and no crowds. And each of e-commerce has a different seller, and that seller has a great or high income because it became popular and people tend to buy online. Type of social class in the Philippines. According to the latest Family Income and Expenditure Survey by the Philippine Statistic Authority or PSA shows that the majority, with 58.4% of Filipinos, belong to the low-income class, while the middle-class companies around 40% of the population, along with only 1.4% fall in the high income. In the current situation to the online selling up to the specific sellers, e-commerce might decrease the ranking including the income of the company. Mostly affected are the individual sellers of each e-commerce. The possibilities of their income might decrease because some sellers are students and no work, so they used to pay necessities and saving money by online selling. In analyzation, taxes decreases the capability of low-income and middle class to purchase online because taxes imposed and goods offered is higher than the normal price. Because the income of them is only enough for their necessities. We know that they have a specific budget, but because of the tax, they cannot buy much online, which used to be cheap. It is the effect of taxes on the customer. Decreases income because they increase the price due to imposing taxes. The customers buys only the necessities. Customer will not explore more when the prices is high, since most of their income is based on the low or middle class. In conclusion, the effect of tax in online selling shows negativity. It shows negativity to the seller, customers, and as a whole of e-commerce. Thank you.
Based on their statements and analytics, we can now create some conclusions. But we should hear what Miss Alay and Mr. Yoso will say. Miss Alay.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Abdul. In online selling, I do not agree with the imposing of tax. It is okay if the seller have his own branch, but if he doesn't have, that should be an exemption. The house that we live in have its own tax. So why do they need to have that law? According to Calvin Coolidge, President of America in 1920s, collecting more taxes than is absolutely necessary is legalized robbery. The sellers should receive income that they deserve because they just selling within the household. Imposing additional taxes is not appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Abdul. Okay, first, if and only if I become the Commissioner of Internal Revenue, but unfortunately I'm not, maybe tomorrow, an online seller should have tax. Wait, let me clarify myself ha. As long as you have sales, you should have tax. Not based on your income, but based on your sales. Income tax is different from business tax. That's what I learned from this book by Enrico Tabag. Shout out. And I think they should lower the, what do you call this, the minimum
because according to the graduated tax table, if your earnings, if your income rather are less than 250,000, you are exempted. But for me, it's a big no-no. It's a big no-no, big no-no. Maybe if they lower or decrease the amount of the income of those who to pay taxes. Like for example, it would be nice if they make it not more than 100,000 for example. Nowadays 100,000 is still a huge amount of income for some people, but not like me. I'm rich. So if your income exceeds 100,000 pesos, you should have tax, especially for those who have proper facilities where they store their items. You cannot call them small business anymore. So therefore, they should have tax. They should have taxes. But not now. Of course, I understand that we're in the mid of the winter. Mids nga ba yun? We are mali. We are in the mid of pandemic. We are in the middle of the crisis. We are in the middle of a crisis, this pandemic, and we are struggling. We are and we are struggling. No, you are struggling. I'm rich. But for me, everyone should have tax. Everyone should have tax. Everyone should have a contribution to the government in order for us to have more proper facilities and to increase the salaries of the public servants like teachers, like those professionals, because we know the struggle of the teachers, especially on the provinces where there is no where there is no bridges, like those kind of like that. And the reason I want everyone to have tax, because I want to be a senator someday. And if everyone have taxes, the government will become rich. And when the government become rich, I will have an opportunity to become corrupt. Always remember, there is no nation without corruption. Remember that, kids. No, I'm just kidding, you know. But for real, I think everyone should have taxes as long as you have income in order for us to have a contribution to the government. That's all. Thank you. Thank you, Miss Alay and Mr. Yoso. We will be back after some words from our sponsor.
Sawa ka na ba sa napakabilis na internet connection? Walang buffering kapag nanonood ka sa YouTube? Kitang-kita mo ang bawat hilatsa ng mukha ng crush mo kapag may FaceTime kayo? Di ka mapagliso ng lag kapag naglalaro kayo ng tropa mo? Ito ang para sa iyo. Introducing Pagong LDT. 10 beses na mas mabagal. 10 beses na nakakabwisit. 10 beses kang mapapamuro sa galit. Sa sobrang bagal, hindi ka makakapagpuyat, hindi ka makakalaro online, at higit sa lahat, walang website na mabubuksan. Ano pang hinihintay? Bili na ng Pagong LDT.
Mahalagang paalala, ang Pagong LDT ay hindi gamot at hindi maaaring gamitin gamot sa anumang uri ng sakit. Okay, there you have it. So many beautiful guests and handsome. Yeah. Thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode of Kwentuhan sa Gigilid, and we sure do hope that you enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. The subscribe button right there. And please leave a comment. And we'll see you guys in the next video.
Yeah, boy! Damn!
Woo!